Welcome to today's webinar, Aging in the Enneagram. I'm your host, Janet Barker Evans. And in today's webinar, we're going to explore more about personality typing and see why it's growing in popularity. And anyone who's lived more than a few decades knows that we do not stay the same person as the years go by, right? So we're going to learn about the Enneagram system, how it can help you know yourself better at any age, and how to use that information to boost your happiness. Sounds good. And before I introduce you to our guest speaker, let's take a minute to talk about how you can interact with us during the webinar. So if you're joining us on Zoom, things can be a little different from computer to computer, but if you look at the bottom of the Zoom screen where you're seeing this webinar, you'll see some icons. The one on the far left is usually a microphone. Now we've muted your voice so there's no background sound, but I'll explain how you can ask your questions, or ask for technical help. As far as the other buttons go, the most important ones say Q&A and chat. When you click the Q&A button, a window will appear where you can type in any question you have for our Q&A session at the end. And feel free to start asking questions during the presentation. You don't have to wait. We're going to get to them all at the end, and we'll get to as many of them as we can. The chat button opens a window where you can chat with our presenters and our moderator. And if you're having any technical issues, let us know in the chat and our moderator will help you if they can. If you're joining us on Facebook, just type your question in the comment box and our team will see it. And after today's webinar, you're going to get a follow-up email with all of this information, as well as a recording of the webinar, so you can refer to it later, share it with your friends and your loved ones. Ready to go? Okay, let's jump in and meet our guest speaker, Russ Hudson. Over the last 3 decades, Russ has established himself as one of the top teachers and developers of the Enneagram personality typology in the world today. He's been writing and teaching full-time with the Enneagram Institute and is co-author with Don Richard Rizzo on 5 best-selling books on the subject, including The Wisdom of the Enneagram and Personality Types. These books are widely considered to be groundbreaking contributions in the field of Enneagram studies, but also important contributions to the literature of psychological types. And beyond the books and teaching, Russ also worked for several years to develop a scientifically validated test instrument, the Russ Hudson Type Indicator, RHETI, now considered a standard test in the Enneagram field. And besides his extensive work with the Enneagram, Russ is also a scholar of East Asian culture and religion, and of the early developments of Western religion and philosophy. He's greatly enjoyed learning about different cultures and cuisines in his extensive travels around the world. Welcome, Russ.
Thanks so much, Janet. Thank you. Great to be here.
Yeah. So to start off, why don't you give us a brief overview of the Enneagram for folks who haven't heard about it? And I know there are different types of personalities that this helps identify. That's right.
Well, the Enneagram, and here's our wonderful diagram. It's a symbol. It's the symbol is there. It's based in some, kind of philosophical frameworks, but basically it's to remind us that these types we're looking at are not in boxes. They're interrelated between people. They're interrelated within our own psychology, and they're dynamic. They're changing. They move around. They're not static. So the symbol's there it's not a tic-tac-toe board. It's to remind us that it's relational and dynamic. But the Enneagram is both a symbol and in these days, a typology. And it's one of those things, it's kind of like yoga in the sense that, you can go to the gym and learn, 5 or 6 positions of yoga to tighten up your derriere, and we'll call it yoga, but there's a little more to yoga than that. It's a vast, ancient philosophy that covers every aspect of life, and you can go as deep into it as you want to. The Enneagram's like that too. And you can use it as deeply as you like. It can just be a help to your relationships or your work, help you understand yourself better, that's for sure. Or if you are fascinated, it takes us on a journey of understanding a lot more about the Western philosophical, religious framework. It goes right back to the beginning of Western civilization, some of the ideas behind it. However, what's interesting now is that some of these ideas that come from the ancient world were re-examined by people trained in psychology and modern ways of looking at things in the 20th century. Starting in the 1950s, 60s, people started looking at these ideas again, saying, these ancient folks were not nincompoops. They knew a thing or two. And it plugs into some of the mystical teachings of our religious traditions. It's related to Kabbalah from Judaism. It's related to the teachings of the Desert Fathers and Mothers, who were the first monks and nuns in the world. And it's related to some elements of Islam later on. But it's also got elements of Greek philosophy. So it's got a rich, deep background. But when we boil it all down to the part that most of us get interested in, it doesn't tell us who we are. It tells us the patterns by which we cope with things. It tells us how we manage our emotions. It tells us how we cope with conflicts and difficulties. It tells us what we do when the chips are down. And while we like to think we're random and might do anything, anybody who loves us and knows us well will instantly recognize the ways that we tend to respond to things. So It's telling us more about our habitual self than it is anything about our ultimate identity.
Got it. How is it different from other personality typing systems? Because there's a lot of different ones that people may be familiar with. How does this one different?
Well, people might know Myers-Briggs, for example, which is based on a Jungian system. They might know the Big Five from Stanford. They might know DISC. All of those are good, and they have their uses, and they're looking at a certain slice of human nature. But I would say the Enneagram goes deeper. The Enneagram, what do I want to say? It looks more at the core of motivation. It looks more at why we do what we do. We might notice that we're a type A personality, but there's different reasons why someone might be a type A personality. So the Enneagram answers more of the why questions. It gets into where it plugs in with religious tradition is it has a lot to do with how we cope and deal with suffering and how we learn to grow through our suffering and learn to find what's good in us in that journey. So it has, let's say, deeper implications than some of the other typologies. Now, the other thing interesting about it, which is I can mention this diagram, and this will be very important for what we're going to talk about today. There are these 9 Enneagram points, and we'll probably say something about them, and they each are an element of human nature. And no matter who you are, you have all 9 of these in you. But as I said, one of them you lead with. But as we're getting in more stress and difficulty, and we're getting more overwhelmed, we tend to get more screwed right down into our coping pattern. We get stuck in it. The traditional word we use is we get fixated. And then we don't see any other options. We don't see other possibilities. We become very reactive and habitual. And if you take that far enough, you get into real psychological trouble. But each one of the points, as you get more grounded, relaxed, present, or mindful, as we say these days, it brings out the best of your Enneagram point, of your type, but it also opens you to the capacities of the others. So each of them can be an expression of something really marvelous, beautiful things about being a human being. And it takes us right down into the particular ways we get into mental and emotional illness, actually, and everything in between. My old writing partner, Don Riso, who passed away a few years ago, that was one of his main contributions to this system of the Enneagram, was this mapping out the vertical dimension of each of these points. And I like that because then it's not just about identifying a pattern or how I'm different from you. That's okay. That's good enough. But then it starts to be a map for a journey for us. It starts to be about our development. And gee whiz, if we're talking about how we want to spend our senior years, that becomes an important part.
So speaking of the types, if we could go back 2 slides
Yeah.
to the different types, what causes us to have a type? Like, is this nature? Is this nurture? Like, what exactly is this type? Like, I know I'm an 8.
Yeah.
Right. But what does that mean? And I know a couple people in the comments were like, I'm a 1, I'm a 3. What causes that? Is it nature? Is it nurture? How is that defined?
Well, the correct answer is yes. It's both. And, this is just congruent with contemporary psychology. Without getting too deep into, latest understanding of ego psychology, part of it we think is what psychologists call temperament. That we are born, or certainly by infancy, we have a temperament. There was a very famous study done at New York University in the early 1960s by a team of psychologists named Thomas and Chess. Excuse me, getting some water. And what they were doing, they were studying babies, and they were looking at how they responded to things. And they were trying to map out how many kinds of temperament are there. Now, they weren't thinking these were separate, and we don't think they're separate in the Enneagram either, but they were looking at what we might call vectors, directions of temperament, and how babies didn't have these equally. I always say, if any of you out there are women and you've had children, even when they were in your womb, they were different when they were in there, and they come out, they kind of continue the trend. So temperament is there from the beginning. And this study found, guess what, 9 vectors of temperament. And they more or less match the Enneagram patterns, which again, you can just say, well, the ancient world, these people were wise. They were not fools. So there's a congruence of people refinding this knowledge. But, I think probably if it was only genetic, then all identical twins would be the same type, and they're not. So it's not only genetic. It's some combination of temperament, genetics, and early environment. So it's kind of both. One way we talk about it in psychology these days is there's this relatively new field called epigenetics. And epigenetics is the study of how genes get switched on or off. Like, you might have a gene for a certain illness, for example, but without certain stressors, that gene won't get expressed. So they are learning how there's a feedback system between environment and genetics. At first, we thought they were 2 separate things. Turns out it's not true. And really, one of the things about the Enneagram is it teaches us to think beyond either or. It's usually both and. My colleague, Father Richard Rohr, always says, and is the most important word in the English language. That, it's a bit of both. I will say that it didn't happen because your mom messed up on your birthday when you were 7. It's set up way before that. It's right there from the beginning. And, this is congruent with the findings of contemporary psychology.
So I told you I'm an 8. Does that mean I'm like opposite of like a 3? Like, you said that you're not just one thing, but if I'm an 8, does that mean like 3 and I are complete opposites, or how do those types interact?
Not necessarily. And I think the people we get along with or don't get along with has a lot more to do with our own childhood, our family, our history than it does with anything inherent in our types. Like, maybe if you were an 8 and you had a 3 in your childhood who was really an important and loving person for you, well, you're probably going to have a good relationship with 3s. You will recognize and respond to that energy because, I know what that is. That's like, that person helped me. But the reverse is also true. If you had somebody who was really giving you a hard time when you were a kid or traumatizing you, well, then when somebody who has a similar energy comes up, you're going to have your guard up. And we pick that up whether or not we're conscious of it.
Yeah. It's like you just, you remember that. It's like an emotional thing.
Right. The inner lines are not necessarily about external relationships. We can talk a little bit more about that perhaps after we've helped people understand a little bit about each of the points, but they're more internal relationships. They're about significant connections with different parts of ourselves. You could say that.
Do you want to, can you unpack then what some of the different points are for folks?
Yeah, sure. I think that will, everybody sort of relaxes more when we talk about that part, right? And then because we're all thinking, which one am I? Which one I am? And I just want to invite you to remember, you're all of them. And one of them is the one that gets you. It's both what comes easiest to you. It's your greatest talent in a way, your capacity, what people go to you for. But it's also overdone the way you screw up your life. So they're all both. So, usually I have certain ways I usually teach it. I often start with 8 and I go 8, 9, 1, and then I go 2, 3, 4, then I do 5, 6, 7. And I could do that, or I could just start at 1. Do you care?
Whatever you want.
I start with 8. The reason I start with 8 is that these points are not randomly arranged. It's not just a grab bag. There's a logic behind it. The 8, 9, and 1 at the top have to do with body intelligence, kinesthetic awareness, being grounded, being practical, being, knowing how the world works. 2, 3, and 4 have to do with our emotions, or what we call in this work our heart center. Have to do with emotional intelligence. And 5, 6, and 7 have to do with cognitive intelligence, intellect. Now, that doesn't mean that each of these points only has one. Of course, we have all of it, but it means, again, we lead with a certain sensibility. So I'll see if I can say some quick things. 8, we'll start off with you. 8 is about empowerment. It's about confidence. It's about being strong in life, strong in the world. It's about taking your place. It's about leading when necessary, willing to take the lead, willing to make the decisions, taking responsibility for things that way. It's about living your life full on while you're here. Work hard, play hard. A lot of 8s will agree with that. And there are, of course, many variations on the theme, but we don't have time to talk about all that. But let's just say that's the core. And so when we're in touch with our 8 energy, regardless of what our main type is, we feel more confident. We feel more energized. We feel more ready to do what we got to do in this world. We feel strong. It's where we find our own sense of power. Now, when we're more mindful, present, and awake, we're more receptive to that life force, right? It's just natural. It's counterintuitive that the more you relax, the more you feel that way. Each type gets caught in let's say an ego pattern, and which again we call a fixation. It has a kind of suffering behind it. The suffering is created because as we lose presence, we lose that sense of confidence. We lose that sense of empowerment. We feel like nothing in the universe has our back. And then we get scared, but we don't want to be scared. We want to be confident. So we try to make ourselves tough. We try to take care of business. We try to be almost forceful sometimes. We try to be big with our energy. And it's just the poor little ego trying to take care of this other quality that we find through our relaxation. They all have something a little counterintuitive. So with 8, I kind of overdo things when I'm caught in the pattern, and I burn myself out. Sometimes I burn other people out, just because I just am relentless with my energy. What do? You take a breath. You notice, oh, there's my little 8 train running away. I don't want that to happen. Let's come back to the good side of 8. And so we learn when I'm doing trainings and programs, we teach people methods to come back to the good side of their Enneagram point. So 9, next door neighbor, sits there at the top of the Enneagram. 9 sort of is about to be or not to be. 9 is about when we're relaxed, we're grounded. We're sensible. We're not so freaked out by everything. We have a steadiness to us, a calmness, an inner peace, you might say. And it's not an inner peace because we spaced out. It's an inner peace because we're really relaxed in where we are and really paying attention to where we are right now. So that From there, you can have creative ideas. You can be such a support to other people. You can have, again, a common sense that other people come to you for. A lot of beautiful things. But as we get more bound up in our personality, which inevitably happens in childhood, we get more caught up in our patterns and lose that magical sense we had as little kids. And in this version, that sense of groundedness, steadiness, peacefulness, and I would also say connection with everything. Like when we're little kids, we feel part of the whole universe. And as we lose that, we kind of retreat. We don't want to make trouble for anybody. We don't want to add to the difficulties in our problems. We get quiet. We don't make demands, and we go into an inner world where we go to get peaceful. We sort of tune out. Now, we still do what we're expected to do. We show up for our family, our job, but there's a certain way in which we've learned to disengage our full heart and attention to survive. So again, when you look at this stuff, you can't blame ourselves. That made total sense to do that. It's a totally valid way to survive psychologically and handle difficulties. And you can do it a little bit or you can do it a lot. But the point is, I want to learn how to get out of that when I wish. I want to learn how to come back into the real groundedness, you see, and they're all like this. So the one, this is the part of us human beings that cares about integrity, honesty, having our words and deeds lined up. Also believing in ethics, higher values. Like we human beings aren't here to just be nutcases. We're here for a purpose. And ones at their best inspire people to step up to the plate, to be their higher self, to care about stuff beyond ourselves, to make sacrifices if necessary for the good of our children or the next generations, right? So very beautiful, very inspiring. And there's a real benevolence or kindness when ones are in their power. When they get caught up in their personality, that desire for integrity turns into rigidity, stuckness, convinced I'm right. This is the right thing. And if you disagree with me, you're just wrong. Right. And so there's a kind of rigidity of thinking. There's even a physical rigidity. I get kind of tight and stuck and we've got to get it correct, you know? And so you could have a little bit of that, or you could have a lot and get really stuck in it, where it becomes a kind of torturous perfectionism, where we're kind of criticizing ourselves all the time because we can never quite get it right, you know? And so already you're probably thinking of people, maybe yourself, who fit some of these patterns, you know? So those three all are about embodiment, because that physical alignment and integrity, the groundedness of the 9, and the life force and energy of the 8, these are all things you kind of get from the body, from being connected with our experience of being here in the body. 2, 3, and 4, we're around the corner to the heart center, to the emotions. And so they're a little bit different themes. 2 is the real desire and capacity for human beings to connect on a heart level. It's our wish to connect, to know each other on a heart level. And it is also the capacity to care and to respond to need. That comes from our heart. It probably has roots in instinct, which, you know, that would be another long conversation. But, you know, when we see someone suffering, when we see a child in need, our heart goes out and we want to help them. We want to take care of them. 2's that leads. Somebody needs something, I'm just there, right? And so a lot of kindness, a lot of consideration of people, a real desire to be a good friend, a good partner, whatever. That's just really paramount for people who have 2 as their lead energy. However, when you take that down a few notches into the personality, it becomes, simply put, codependency. I lose my center. I lose myself in other people. I get obsessed about needing to be convinced constantly that my relationships are okay, the person still likes me, person still loves me, and I get caught up in all that. And also when I'm doing that, I'm not recognizing I have needs. I'm just acting as if and talking as if and convincing myself that I'm only here for the other person, but actually I do have needs. And when I'm not dealing with them, it starts to corrupt and distort the relationship, makes things very hard. And then people don't love me, but they don't know what to do with me, right? They don't know. So again, we don't learn this to criticize ourselves. We learn this because if that's our lead point, sometimes we're going to do that. And we go, how do I come back? 3, next door neighbor, is you wouldn't guess 3 is a heart type at first, because 3s are doers. They a lot of times get mixed up with 8s because they like to get things done. 8s and 3s love to get stuff done. 3s have checklists. They are effective. Their pride is in their effectiveness, their efficiency. And whether they're running a corporation or running a household, they want to do an excellent job. So 3s are about personal excellence. They're also about, when you're really in the power of 3, even if you were in the hospital, even if you couldn't do anything, you feel the value of you, the preciousness of your life. It's a little weird to say we love ourselves, but it's kind of like more like you recognize that you are lovable for being you and for having this life. And it's a sweet, beautiful thing. Then when we realize that, what we do for others is like a love gift. Our work is an expression of our love. We're working because we love people, we love the world, and we just enjoy it. We enjoy our work. So when that goes south, it turns into workaholism. It turns into can't stop. It turns into burnout. It turns into being so much caught up in my goals and agendas that I forget the value of human connection, even with myself. And I get kind of lost. I look great on the outside. Everybody else will think I'm, should get the trophy, but internally I'm becoming more empty until it becomes a big problem. So many of us can sure recognize that one. 4, moving along with music and song. That's the thing with the Enneagram. Anything you talk about, you got to do 9 times.
Yeah, one for every one.
Yeah. So 4 is a little different. It's the heart's love of beauty and intimacy and mystery. And all of these things are really about the desire, those moments where we recognize who and what we are is something way more beautiful and interesting than how we usually think about ourselves. It's about the journey to discover, as we would say traditionally, our true self. Who is that? What is that? And as you are discovering that, there's more of a appreciation of beauty and intimacy, because beauty and intimacy are both kind of the perfumes, the fragrances that come out of that landing in ourselves in a deeper place. It's suddenly all our ideas about ourselves and other people seem kind of dumb, kind of pointless. And actually encountering ourselves and other opens up this heart state of intimacy, mystery, beauty. Yeah, we all know what that is. Now, that's pretty gorgeous. And wouldn't it be great to have more of that in our lives? As we lose the thread in this plot, we get self-obsessed, self-absorbed, caught up in our feelings, going over our issues over and over. We're trying to figure ourselves out, but without really connecting with ourselves on a deeper level. So we're just tracking our feelings and thinking, oh, well, I feel a little weird today. Why is that? What happened? Why are you not responding to me? And we get so self-absorbed, it really becomes harder and harder for us to connect with anyone. And leads us into kind of a lot of self-disparagement and being down ourselves and even depressed. All 9 types can get depressed, by the way. All 9 types. It's not just one type that does. Again, the way out, you see yourself going into your stuff and getting more self-obsessed and self-absorbed. Take a breath. Find yourself here and now. Come back to the good side of it. That's always the message. Okay, 5, 6, and 7. This is the head types, the intellect, the mental stuff. And Enneagram 5 is my dominant. I've worked on it a lot over the years. I actually like to hang out with people now. That was quite something. 5 is the capacity in us human beings to realize things we haven't realized before, to recognize truth, to notice things we haven't noticed before. So it's about revelation, really. It's the aha. Oh my gosh, I didn't realize. That's it. So people who are 5s live for those moments of realizing deeper truth, figuring stuff out. I doubt that I would have picked this career had I not had that as a motivation. Yeah, I wanted to know what really made people tick. And so there's this extraordinary sense of just trying to see reality as it really is, to come to some deeper understanding of it. Now, tremendous innovations, creativity, discoveries come from people doing that. But when that goes off whack, and it does, we start to feel like overwhelmed by the world. We're getting so much information, we can't deal with it. So we start withdrawing and disconnecting and isolating. And then we try to figure it out from this detached and isolated place, which seems to make sense on an ego level. It kind of does. But oddly, the more we detach, the less we understand things. We have a lot of ideas and theories, but we don't know anything anymore, if you see what I mean. And so that can lead us into very weird, isolated, eccentric places. We look kind of, crazy. All the types can go crazy as they down the levels, but we 5s kind of look crazy when we are in trouble. It's identifiable. Some people still running companies, and they're out there. So 6 is this is called the troubleshooter. I'm wearing my green today for Ireland. The original name we had for this was the Loyalist, but that name didn't work too well in Ireland. So troubleshooter is good. 6s are also mental types. They're more emotionally available and connecting than 5s are. But 6s, they're trying to figure out, their knowing is about what to do. What should I do? Should I speak? Should I be silent? Should I go forward? Should I stop? Should I turn left or right? Will I go on vacation, or should I go later? It's about how we make decisions. And the knowing, when you really know something, you might have gone back and forth, driving yourself crazy, trying to figure out what to do about something, even if it's a fun thing. But then just something comes to you, and you just know it's this. And sometimes, you notice from 6s, sometimes you're driving yourself crazy, and then a real danger arises, and suddenly all the nonsense stops, and you just know what to do. It's about that part of us. You could say it's intuitive knowing of how to navigate the world and bring good stuff to the world and take care of things. The 6 also is a strong feeling of wanting to be a caretaker of their life, to really, I feel like I've been given responsibility. I want to make sure things get taken care of that need to get taken care of. So they're very responsible people usually. So that sense of devotion, that sense of noticing things, is kind of like being a guardian for my world, is a powerful and beautiful thing. It also brings the sense, when we're really in that, we feel like we're where we're supposed to be. We found our place. We're doing what we're supposed to do. However, as this goes south, we never feel like we're doing the right thing. We don't know. We're confused. We're overthinking things. We're driving ourselves crazy, going back and forth in our mind. And then sometimes we'll just impulsively do something to just get it over with, even though it isn't the same as knowing what to do. We're just kind of jumping. And we get suspicious and doubting and pessimistic more and more about the world. We're quick to think of why not to do something. And that's no fun. And it can go to the level of paranoia. But, you can just notice, wow, I'm overthinking this. I'm scaring myself, actually. 6s are in trying to figure out what to do. They're trying to figure out what could go wrong. And as they think about all the things that could go wrong, they're actually scaring themselves. Like your primitive brain doesn't know that you're just thinking about it. It thinks these things are happening. So suddenly you're anxious, you can't sleep. Everybody else would say, God has a great life. But inside you feel like everything's falling apart. So you get the idea. 7, our last one. Yay. 7 is called the enthusiast. 7 is our capacity for inner freedom, positivity, gratitude, really seeing possibilities. So 7 is quite wonderful. I mean, who doesn't like that? Everybody likes that, I think. And so when we're connected with the 7 part of us, we feel this life as possibility, as endless possibility. There's a spaciousness in our mind. We don't feel crowded or cluttered or enclosed. Everything feels more open. And that makes us feel lighter. And then even if things are going tough, there's a positivity in us that doesn't go out. There's a way that we know that there's a bigger truth than the difficulty we're facing at the time. It gets us through. It's, sometimes there's a lot of these kind of books out there that tell you just avoid negativity, avoid pain and difficulty, just keep yourself positive all the time. That's just teaching you how to do the personality of a 7, and you're going to get in trouble. Basically, the real positivity is what moves toward the suffering. Real positivity is more powerful. The light is more powerful than the darkness. The light that will reach into any situation. So really highly developed 7s, they're helping people out. They're working with kids. They're working in hospice. They're working in disaster areas because they know that positivity is so needed and they see it can help people. And that brings them great joy. When they're not so aware, then they are afraid they're going to get overwhelmed by pain, difficulty, suffering. They're going to feel trapped by life circumstances and lose that freedom. And then they're escapists, sometimes into work, sometimes into doing a lot of things, sometimes into travel. But there's a way that I'm trying to avoid my own difficulties, which of course they catch up sooner or later. So again, 7, like all of them, I can just notice, wow, here I am. You are big enough to handle this, whatever it is. You're braver and stronger than you think. Come right on back. And that positivity is here and going to help me with whatever this difficulty is. And so that's all 9 of them. And, I'm trying to talk about them, not just only as a pattern, but as a trajectory, as a path.
Well, and speaking of trajectory and path, like, do they change as we get older? So if I'm an 8 now, am I going to be a 3 later? Are we like locked in, or does it change over time?
Well, it does change, but there's part of us that does stay the same. But I would say that if you were an 8 and you're like, remember those levels that we looked at? If you're starting life because you had some tough times in your childhood and you're kind of down there in the deeper parts of 8, if you actually start to do some healing and psychological development and some spiritual work, and you start to live more and more at the higher levels of 8, it's as if you've got a new personality because it's so different. The high side of 8 is so different than when I'm really down there and caught up in that, pushing myself all the time. The other thing is that if you think of going down into the fixation as like a funnel, like we get more and more narrow, limited, repetitious, stuck in our behavior. And we keep doing the same thing over and over, whether or not it works, right? And telling people what they can do if they don't like it, right? So, but as you grow psychologically, as you grow spiritually, the funnel opens up. And what does it open up to? The capacities, the good side of the other 8 points. So as we grow, and I don't think there's any particular way that they're going to necessarily always show up, but we start to open to other possibilities. So both being at a higher level of our type looks like being a different person, but we also really can embrace other parts of ourselves. We go down there because we're afraid, because we're convinced that's the only way to survive, is to be a certain way. And when we do that, we shut out a lot of our inner resources and capacities. So as we climb out of that fixated pattern, many resources come together. And again, we would look like a different person, anybody who knew us. Like as a 5, people would say he used to always be so, remote and unreachable. And he was seemed kind of cold. And, what the hell happened? It's like, I'm not a different type. I'm a healthier 5. And as a healthier 5, I can play with the other ones. Now, the other thing is, and those inner lines, they're clues about ingredients that are going to come into play as we get healthier. When we're still stuck, those 2 lines represent ways we act out, because they're kind of counter to what we're usually doing. So, for example, you have 8 and I have 5. When an 8 gets overstressed, I've been pushing, making things happen. I reach a point of overwhelm because I'm just a human being. People forget that about me, but I forget that about me. And then I want to do the opposite. I want to retreat. I want to be alone. I don't want to deal with people. I'm going to sit here until I've figured out what's going on. I might study, and I look like a 5. That's why that line is there from 8 to 5. As I get overwhelmed and overstressed, I go to 5. But that's because 5 is an ingredient I actually need. So it's actually, I'm subconsciously recognizing, wow, I need more alone time. I need time to sort things out. I need to balance my introspection and my action. And 2 is the other direction, same thing. 8, we make ourselves tough because we're afraid of getting hurt. Mm-hmm. If we got hurt, then we're going to have some pretty good walls, and everybody's like that. But 8 particularly, I'll sneak love from certain people and I want them to see what a great friend I am to them and how much I love them until they get it. But at the same time, as I grow in that direction, I can receive love. I can be more that heart connection of the 2, it balances out the 8. So those inner lines, it would take me time to explain all that, but yeah, they're meaningful. They're not just there to make it look like a devil symbol or something.
So I love, this is so fascinating. And I know people have popped in some questions, but how does knowing this about ourselves help us cope? I know when we met earlier, you had talked about how like a health scare and knowing yourself helps people cope. Can you talk a little bit about that?
Yeah. Well, when we get hit by a problem like a health crisis, and as we get older, it's more and more likely we're going to have visits with the medical professionals, right? And I speak from experience. Our first response will be the automatic response of our Enneagram type, which may or may not be helpful. If it's the personality version, as I've tried to explain, probably it's going to also create problems for me. Like, I had a heart event about 1.5 years ago. I was in Paris and I was over there working and I was by myself, and I recognized this and I gave praise to the Lord that I spoke some French, and they brought me to the hospital and they took beautiful care of me and helped me. The doctors, nurses, everybody wonderful. However, my first impulse was, I got to deal with this on my own. I don't trust anybody to help me. Now, you know what? That was not an adaptive response. Mm-hmm. And had I done that in the hospital, not so good. Had I done that, my sister came over from the States to help me out. And so, I had to recognize my default was not the winning formula. It might be in some situations, but even there, my default ego personality reaction is not the same as the higher side of it, the gift of it. They're 2 different things. They're related, but they're not the same. So in coming back to myself, my wisdom, my knowledge, my intelligence showed me what to do. For example, when I started to wake up in the middle of the night with pressure on my chest and my left arm hurting, I knew what that meant. And I knew I had to respond to that. And so that partially saved my life. But had I just been a 5 and just detached from that or minimized it or done all other things I might have done, the situation could have turned out quite differently. So we learn to take, here's the bottom line. If we really have a certain Enneagram type as our dominant pattern, we will do that a lot. We can count on it. If we learn to be aware of that instead of just giving ourselves to it, it becomes an alarm clock. It becomes a reminder to come back to myself, come back into my grounded, empowered, aligned body, my beautiful heart connection, my preciousness, my depth. I come back to my clear mind that can actually see what to do. And the habit, instead of what makes me check out, becomes what brings me back. So we learn to use our personality and turn it into a support, a help, a tool to restore our full humanity. Because the point isn't to be just, one of these little fragments. It's to become more and more of a whole human being, which hopefully in our golden years, as we say, we've got some time and space to really take on that project. Address the things that I really couldn't maybe when I was younger and raised in a family or in my career, what have you.
Yeah. That's great. So we're going to wrap up and get to questions because I know people are asking questions and we want to get to some of those. So it's time to hear from you guys. Please pop your questions in the Q&A. We're going to ask those on Zoom. Use the Q&A button on the bottom of your screen. On Facebook, just type it in. We're going to get to as many as we can. And like I said, you're all going to get a follow-up email with the recording of this webinar so you can refer to it later. You can share it with your friends and family. We also, right now, we're putting up this resource slide. There's so much more here to unpack, Russ. We could talk about this for days.
Oh, yeah.
So here's a resource.
Sometimes I
do. I'll bet. So here's a lot of, and again, you're going to get this via email, but Russ has a new audiobook, the Enneagram 9 Gateways to Presence. You can read this book. We've got all these on here. You can take the test online. Someone asked about that. You can follow him on Facebook, on Twitter, on Instagram. And now we're going to hit some Q&As if that's cool with you, Russ.
Okay. Let's go.
All right. The first one. Can you talk about what a wing is and how that changes my number?
Sure. Short way to think of that. I came up with this metaphor a while ago, and it seems to help people. People like visual images. I do. So if you think of the Enneagram circle, the circle around it as a rainbow, a circular rainbow. Maybe we make red, 8, start with 8 and red, and it goes to sort of orange and yellow and into green and then into the blue, green, blue, deep blue, purple, and back into red again. So if you considered like each one of us takes root somewhere on the circle, we can grow out from that root, but our root is somewhere. And so are you a greenish blue or a purplish blue? Are you an orangey yellow or a greenish yellow? You see, so it's just a way of focusing in a little more on some of the characteristics. It seems that the wing, by definition, is always one of the types on either side of your dominant type. So if, for example, if you're an 8, you can have a 7 wing or a 9 wing, because those are the two numbers on either. You can't have a 3 wing or a 4
Got
wing.
it.
You might have an influence.
Wings are on the side of your number.
Right. It's just sort of zeroing in on a certain flavor of your type. There's other things this is relevant to talking to this group. I have noticed, and I used to talk about this with Father Rohr, that in the first part of life and starting in childhood, we figure out that leaning on one side of our type gets our needs met better. So I'm a 5 and I have a 4 wing. What does that mean? As a child, I discovered that creative, emotional depth side of 4 got my needs met better than the 6 side. So I went with that. And so for the first part of your life, you tend to emphasize one of the wings. But Father Rohr and I both noticed independently that many people, when they hit midlife, they start to explore and unpack the other wing. So that's another way our personality grows. It's sort of like we expand into more rooms of the house, right? So maybe you're an 8 and you start off with a 7 wing, but you suddenly hit the middle of your life and you start, well, this 9 isn't so bad, actually. I actually like having, gardening, and I like a little quiet time and reading my book, and that's pretty nice, and it's just balancing out the whole thing. Again, the point is how we move we find where we are situated. From there, we can figure out what will bring balance.
So we have a question from someone on our Facebook feed, and this is a good one. I always think about this every time I take any of these tests, Russ. How do you account for the fact that people may take the questionnaire aspirationally? Yeah.
Well, one of the problems of anything like this is that, we can try to make it correspond to how we want to see ourselves rather than how we are. That's just a thing. Like maybe I take a questionnaire in an organization and I have some notion of what I think management expects of me. So I'm going to push it that way. Or maybe I've heard something about the Enneagram and I'm invested in being a certain type. So I tilt it. I mean, you can do that. That's one of the reasons why psychologists know, people who work with psychometrics know that any test that relies on self-reporting cannot have high level accuracy. Some of my colleagues will say things like their test is 95% accurate. It's not possible. It's not possible. Any psychologist can tell you that. That's marketing. But, we do our best to hide so that you can't psych it out entirely, but we always can psych it out some. I think the other meta answer here is that traditionally, this knowledge was only made available to people who were very sincere, dedicated, and on a path of self-knowledge for quite some time before they were introduced to this material. Now, you just can get it off the street. You can read it in, a magazine, and away we go. So we can't, the very thing the Enneagram is trying to bring us is accurate, honest self-awareness. If we're going into it with a agenda to not see what we're up to, of course, that's going to take a lot longer.
Yeah.
But sometimes loved ones and sometimes, friends that you meet studying this can help us get it straight. I've seen families where somebody's taken the test and reporting their self-awareness, and the family is just falling on the floor laughing at the distortion of how this person sees themselves.
That's great.
Partly, I think when I'm teaching or I'm coaching somebody, I try to make it 100% safe for them to really look at this more accurately. And I do not tell people what they are.
Yeah. And what I love, there's such a focus today too about knowing ourselves. And I think COVID has certainly made us all want to know more about ourselves, how we cope. And what I'm hearing you say, one of the questions coming in too is, are you saying that if we incorporate more of each of the good from each number, we're going to find ourselves more balanced and well-rounded and healthier? Is that what you're kind of saying?
Yes. And that won't happen without seeing what you're addicted to.
Mm-hmm.
In other words, we're not going to let go. We'll say, oh, yeah, that's a nice idea. And then turn around and do what we've been doing all along. It's sort of like, there's that expression, hitting bottom. You have to hit a certain bottom where you realize, what, this really isn't working. I'm killing myself here. I need to. And that's, again, where when we get into the later part of life, this opportunity to have life review and really look at what we've done and what was great and what worked and what we're just kind of defensive about. It's a real golden opportunity to start to recognize what our real gifts are. and what's beautiful about us, and how
Yeah.
sometimes those truths get lost in the rush of life. We don't really always see them or appreciate them. Like some relationships, we don't appreciate them till they're not available
Yeah.
anymore.
Yeah. We have another great question.
Mm-hmm.
So somebody's asking, they're saying, my mom is a type 1.
Yeah.
She's been pretty critical of others her whole life.
Yeah.
In the past 18 months, she's experienced some memory loss and has become less critical and seems happier with herself and others overall. Is there any research about how our personalities might actually relax or become more integrated in instances where there is dementia or other neurological effects of aging?
Yeah, I don't know if there's any explicit research about that. I do know that there's a growing number of physicians studying the Enneagram. I know there's a growing body of study of the biological components of it, which I'm pretty sure there have to be. But that makes sense to me. I mean, a couple of things. When we are losing certain capacities, mental capacities, the brain is such that it starts throwing off the luxury items. And the luxury items are often in service of our ego agenda and how we're maintaining a certain sense of self. But as your sense of self sort of softens, some of the structures around our Enneagram point may also soften. But the other thing related to this that I'll say, it's because we're talking about the whole phenomenon of aging. Of course, we can't help it if we're dealt a genetic set of cards that's going to put us in some kind of problem of that nature. That happens, and it's not our fault. What do you do? Nonetheless, I still feel that people who have been doing this inner work, who've been really cultivating their presence, their sharpness of mind, their suppleness of heart, their relaxed inhabitation of their body, even if they start to have some of these physical problems, I think the effects will be less severe. I also think that even without some kind of dementia or problem with Alzheimer's, that whole spectrum of difficulties that can beset us in later years, I think that just regular people, if we've taken time in our life to cultivate this root system in us, this groundedness in our being, to use philosophical language, then we tend to be more relaxed and enjoy our later years. We're still open. We're still curious. We're having fun. We're finding new hobbies. And we all know people in their senior years are more like that. If we don't cultivate those things, my observation is, and the traditional teachings behind this is, we just crystallize around our personality pattern until it's as if that's all that's left of us. So if we were a kind of paranoid, worried person, we become a really paranoid, worried person in our senior years, and it's like all that's left of us. If we were very clingy, then we get even more clingy. So, the big teaching here is there's no time like the present.
Yeah.
If we start learning these things now, there's more good stuff available. Whatever our ultimate fate may be, we're doing what we can on our part to maximize our possibilities.
Yeah. And as relates to relationships with people, we've had a couple questions on whether or not some types get along better with each other than other types, and how you can use this knowledge of types to strengthen a relationship.
Well, two different questions. Let's see if I can get to the point. I don't think that it's a given that any two types are going to get along or not get along. As I said, that has more to do with your history.
Yeah.
If you had a wonderful, if you had a wonderful grandmother who was just so there for you, and let's say she was an Enneagram 9, when you're around 9s, you're going to get that feeling, and you're going to be predisposed to trust those people. If you had somebody who was scary for you as a kid, anytime somebody comes up that's that kind of, quality of that type, your guard will go up. But I think one of the great benefits of learning this material, when we get together, we meet people of the other types who aren't like that person from our history. And so we get what I call corrective experiences. We start to taste what the good side of it is like, and recognize that in ourselves too. So that's very good. In terms of relationship, I think there's a lot of things, but one is Don Riso used to say, it's about connection, not conversion. It's about communication, not conversion. We always want the person to do our will, to buy into our agenda and so forth. We tend to overvalue our gift and undervalue the other person's gift. But when you have a powerful relationship and you have two different Enneagram types, you're starting to see they're bringing something to the picnic that I wouldn't necessarily bring. And if I'm appreciating that and letting the person know it, and that we're talking together without blaming, but really discussing where we get into trouble, that's got to help the relationship.
That's great. That's great. Well, thank you so much. I realize we're even going over. We could keep talking about this forever, but that is all the time we have today. Russ, thank you so much for joining us today, for all this great information. And thank you to all of you viewers for being here and asking your questions. We're going to be emailing you the recording and a transcript of the webinar, so you're able to view it again, share with family and friends. And we ask you to please come back and join us for our next webinar on April 17th. The subject will be Get Financially Fit with speaker Lynette Calfani. You can register right now at brookdale.com/in-the-know. And our webinars feature a different subject every month. So you can visit brookdale.com/in-the-know to view past webinars and learn more. And we'd love for you to join us again soon. So thank you again, Russ. Thank you again, everybody. Until next time, we hope you stay safe, happy, and well. Thank you so much.
Thank you.